All right, so we've been learning all about different materials and different ways to make things, different kinds of shiny. And let me grab my render view here. There we go. Reflective, kind of shiny, kind of matte, very matte. But one thing you'll notice about all of these objects, except for anything that I've modeled in, like over here, they're very, very smooth. But most things are not like that. Now, the gold star for adding texture to things is 2D texture placement, where you like go and you like paint something somewhere in Photoshop and you bring it in, and we've done that before, and we attach it here through a file placement node. But in order to do that, we have to map UVs, and that is not a thing we've done too much of yet. It's also very time consuming, and also there are some cheats available. So we're going to be focusing in on this Lambert one right here, just to kind of get started. But there is something called bump mapping, and that can also need UVs sometimes, but sometimes not. And the things I'm going to show you, they are kind of like some cheap tricks that can get you some not as render intensive results that will still make things look not so flat. So the bump map right here is always input as a texture map of some sort. So there's no setting, it's just we have to connect something. There are several things in here that can work for this. Fractal, noise, simplex noise, probably anything that doesn't have the word 3D after it. But what we can do is I'm going to go and I'm going to grab the fractal. Now, the first thing that happens is stuff that definitely wouldn't work, but that's okay. We're going to change it. You'll see that the bump value is this number that's like kind of set in stone. When it's yellow like this, it's being driven by something else, and it's being driven by this fractal node. So we made a node for the bump, which its value is determined by some other node, which is this thing right here. It's a generated fractal. So these are things being generated by Maya. We don't have to go to Photoshop. We don't have to do any texture mapping. Now, we can change the bump depth over here. So a smaller number, the closer you get to 0, the less bumpy it'll be. So we can change that. And then we can go over here into the fractal, and we can actually change what is being generated. So we can, let me get a little bit closer. So I can say things like I can turn down the amplitude. And you'll see that when I turn it down quite a lot, like up here, it's pretty, we can see the edges of it. We can see the problems with it, because this is not actually adding anything to the geometry. If you look at the sides here, nothing is bumpy, right? So it's like giving away the game. But if we turn it down, if we just want to add like a little bit of something, we can do that here. And so we can tinker with the settings. Yeah, frequency ratio is actually just like there we go. Is that how many little bits there are? Oh, that looks like a golf ball. Sweet. I love happy accidents. So the pipe is going to be too much, but this may almost look like a golf ball. Almost. What does this do? Nothing I want it to do. So there's a lot of different settings in here, and they're all of the different generated ones will have different settings. But what I can do then is, we can actually see a seam there. So if we look real close, you can see the seam. That's considered like the edge of it. So we're going to rotate that around. We're going to cheat, right? This is all about those little cheats that get us a result pretty quickly. So we're going to ask it to render for us. This might take a little bit longer, so I've added another foil for what's going on. So it may take a bit longer. It doesn't quite look like the golf ball I wanted, which is a shame, and that probably has to do with how the lights are catching it. And as I said before, this is looking way more bumpy than this. So I would need to make 2 different materials and have different settings for each one. which we can totally do. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to this one. We're going to say assign. Actually, I have an existing material. So we're on this one. I have one that's very, very similar. I just have to turn the something down. I have to change the color back to this. Give me 1 second. There we go. So I can do that again. I can apply a bump map, which again is a fake bump. This is not going to be real. This is not going to actually change the geometry. I'm going to turn, actually I'm going to leave the bump up there for now. I'm going to tinker with the settings on the fractal first. Wishing I could remember what it was I did in the first place to make things work. Part of it was definitely turning up the frequency ratio. This is where the middle is too. So both of these, we're basically looking at the back side of it. You can see it's pinching at the top. So if you want a reason to not start with spheres, you're looking at it. But the rest of it's doing okay. And now that I have two different sets here, I can come to this one and I can turn down the amplitude on the pipe quite a lot. And I can leave this. Oh, where's the bump? So once you, there it is. I'm looking for the bump setting so I can turn this down a little bit. There we go. So these should be much closer now. They may not look exactly like I want them to, but they're going to be much closer together in terms of the amount of bump on there because they're two different size things, right? So if you're doing a generated texture and you stretch one over a huge object and you stretch one over a tiny object, of course they're going to be a little bit different. And so what happens with a bump map is that it does catch the light. So within the object itself, you can get this texture. So it looks like bumpy and whatever. But you can't get any weird edges, right? So there is a limit to what it can do, but it can add a lot. Now there are other types here. If I want to change it, I have to go to my nope, just kidding. My rendering editor, Hypershade. What you can do is you click on the one you want to change, which I'll be honest, I don't remember which one it is. There we go. I didn't label these very well. Ambient, and then I click this button right here, which is basically like show me all the things connected to the things. And I can just delete all that stuff. A fractal node is completely different from a noise node, is completely different from a whatever these other ones are node. And what that means is that you're not going to change from one to another. Oh, I hate that. You never know what's going to happen. There we go. So I can go on to noise. This also has this frequency ratio where you can turn it up or turn it down. Amplitude, got to turn that down because you could see it was like blowing it out kind of. I'm also going to kind of cheat. Don't freeze on me. Not show the areas that are gonna not work. And then let me see what else I want to do. I've got it pretty high on the bump right now. It's pretty turned up. Let me see here. Also, you can see I'm not getting the best shadows because again, I have my settings not quite turned up as high as I'd want. It does bother me, but honestly, it's better than, waiting 5 minutes for each render. Oh yeah, little too much. In large part because it's going to again, you're not going to see the edges. If you watch 3D TV shows, you see stuff like this a lot, where you can tell things have a bump map on them. But it is, from a rendering perspective, the cheapest way to get, more of a texture on things. Now I'm going to go here to get to this, and then I'm going to click this button to get to the bump, and I'm actually going to put this at -1, which will do the same pattern, but it'll be indented. And then I'm going to save this image. before redoing it. And so just to show you that you can kind of like reverse what it's doing with the bumps. So before it was doing indents, and here the inverse is going, or I'm sorry, before it was doing like outdents. I don't know what you would call that, but basically bumping it out. This is taking whatever information was going out is now being pushed in, so it reverses it. And so I'm going to save that too, and then we can go back and forth. There you go. Slightly different result with otherwise the exact same settings. And so this allows you to add like some gentle texture to things. I'm going pretty far out there with this. I don't know that that's what should happen. I'm actually kind of, oh no, that's metal. This might work. I'm going to attempt live here on television to use, because there is technically, it's terrible. I probably shouldn't be doing this. Woof. There is a wood texture. Oh, it's a 3D texture. All right. So I would need to, with 3D textures, you need to say how they're placed. And this is where mapping would be important, right? Because in order to place it, yeah, that's not really going to work out the way we want it to. It's also definitely layer size. There's not enough information. I have no idea what this is going to render like, but it's going to be funny. Yeah, I know wood is like the thing people are always wanting to put a texture on. And if you UV map something properly and then you place a texture, oh, no way. It looks better out here than it does in there. So it's not mapped properly. You could see the craziness happening, but there is technically a wood grain now on this, and it's blue because why not? So it's kind of impossible to preview because I'm looking at this going, this is insane. But let me grab this and bring the rotations back to 0, 0, 0. And then I can, around this one, say 90? Not 900, my goodness. There we go, 90. There we are. And I can also make this not blue because that's throwing me off, if I'm going to be honest. Want this to be very dark. Cool. And let's see what this does. But again, these are procedural, so you don't have as much control over them. I can't go in and say, I don't like that one knot, right? Like that's not a thing you can do. Yeah, so this isn't lining up correctly either. This is, I am choosing poorly in how I line up these things. But you can see the beginnings of what might almost were. Oh, and my specular highlight is still blue, which is unfortunate. So we're gonna make that light. There we go. But yeah, so this would have to be, I'm not even sure what direction this should go in. If I'm being totally honest, it's difficult to tell. And so you'd have to keep running tests like this. But nope, still not right. It's cool texture, but it's not what I'm looking for. All right, so be careful with 3D textures. They require a lot more options, whereas this one just kind of maps itself out over the whole thing evenly. But of course, you do have edge problems, and you'll always have that with these. This is a sharp edge anyways because of the lighting, which maybe works to our advantage. It means we can't see the fact that there's like an edge there. But yeah, any one of these, you can add a bump and then give them a shot. I would suggest just like giving them a try. If you see, keep an eye out for these boxes. They're the ones that are 3D shaders, and so they are very difficult. They're a little bit more difficult to work with. Ooh, there we go. This is called Simplex Noise. Maybe that'll give me my golf ball. Use judiciously. Use with caution, right? Turn the bump down to something less than 1 so that it's just like a very subtle thing. Turn down the amplitude on these things, turn down the scale on these things, or maybe up depending on the type of texture it is, right? Use smallly. Use for subtlety, use for small details of things, and they can come in really handy. And remember that it doesn't actually change geometry. There is no extra geometry on this. There is no extra geometry on this. I don't hate it for this. It almost is looking like a mini golf ball. Remember, I don't play golf though, right? So this is too much. This is nice, actually. This right here. That's a nice eggshell pattern for like a wall. If I put that on the wall, I think it would look nice. So as soon as I said it, I realized I had to try it. And this may not quite be the texture I had in mind for the walls. I like the result I'm getting on the back, but on the side, it's not great. Oh, why is this still on? There we go. Still not great. So part of the reason it's not great is that there was more geometry over here. So I fixed that. I kind of put more geometry on this side too. I did a terrible job of it. But another reason is just the light is hitting it very differently. So this is very flat and this is like very dramatically lit. And the result is that one is getting exactly the amount of texture I think it needs just to not be flat and terrible. And the other side is like the sides of it are being like overdone, right? They're overly dramatically textured. And so that's one of the things you'll have to contend with as well, regardless of how you do a bump map, right? Regardless of what you're doing, if the light hits it differently, the result's going to be different. But I do like this. So this back wall being nicely evenly lit, that little bit of texture just like gives a little bit of something. It's different than this glossy table, which I should have gotten more of in the picture now that I'm thinking about it. What was I thinking? Am I crazy? So we can start to see the difference between something that is shiny, not only shiny and reflective, but flat, and versus something that has a little bit of a texture to it, a little bit of something for the shadows to pick up on. And the enormous difference that can make. All right, so bump maps, they're a cheat, yes, but they are a cheat that is much used and much, oh wait, there we go, very much used in a lot of different ways. They're a cheap way to get some texture. Oh, and I see now that stupid gamma is off. This is almost starting to look like a golf ball at a mini golf course. I just have to take down that highlight a little bit. All right, and so keep this in mind as you're working. I know we haven't gotten to UVs yet, but this is another good way to make things a little less shiny and new and flashy looking.